After the draft board hearing, I was sort of in shock. So I went home. Linda and I talked about this, and I said, well, do you ever want to live in Vancouver?
It was a big decision, but he definitely didn't want to do what they wanted him to do. So we had to go.
It was a bigger deal for me to be pulling up stakes and leaving California forever, I thought.
And it's hard to breathe the air around here, 'cause you've taken all the fresh air and
You're leaving behind a structure that supports you, and it's not there. That was something I couldn't have planned for or anything. It just happened.
feel much good.
We arrived in Victoria, and it took us 25 minutes to go through immigration, and bingo, we are landed immigrants and Canadians. That's pretty clear welcoming. You know, there was no objections, no obstacles in our path at all.
We had all the papers and we had enough money, and we sat there in the office, and the guy interviewed Gary, and at the very end of the interview he asked me my name. That was it. Totally uninterested in me. I went as like an appendage to Gary.
So there was no looking back. Things happened so quickly after coming across that border that life had just started brand new. We were immigrants, we were pioneers. It was easy to carve out who we really were and go in our own direction. So it was a real breath of fresh air.
It wasn't a breath of fresh air for all the groups involved with the Exodus. Canadian immigration policy made no clear decision publicly for American military deserters and gave immigration officials full authority to use their personal judgment case by case at the border. As a result, many were denied entry, as immigration officials were predominantly ex-military themselves. Subsequently, with nowhere to go, many fled back to the underground or were caught and jailed in the U.S. For the young men and women who did make it over the border, there was another hurdle: living in the Great White North.
So put me out of my misery. You know, these last few hours have felt like a week.
When we first came to British Columbia, I didn't know anything about the government, anything about the federal government and provincial government. I had no idea. I was like any ignorant American who thinks there's igloos on the other side of the border. I had never studied Canada in school. You know, Canada was a complete unknown.
I thought maybe Canada would be a better place to live in, where people had a little bit more social conscience. Canada was opening its doors to people who were saying no to the war. We were welcome.
Now, the only reason somebody would live on a road like this is because when you get there, it's worth it. There is Mitchell Bay. Look at Mitchell Bay. God damn, I need a drink. It doesn't have a car anymore. Here it comes.
We've finally arrived at our destination.
Well, I brought a filmmaker with me. I'm not sure that was a good idea.
Ralph Harris is the last remaining hippie from my parents' days in Mitchell Bay.
Let's drink a bottle of wine.
Oh, I'm
I'm
all
ready.
for it.
This scene is familiar to me. Once upon a time, this was my life. Ralph was born in 1933 in New Orleans. The grandson of a preacher man, he moved to California in the early 60s, then to Mitchell Bay with his wife, Julie.
It was crazy. Craziness was happening down there in the States, I felt, and so this was a way to get away from the craziness. I didn't think I was going to live past 40. I just wanted to have a good time in life, you know. I came up here when I was 38, so maybe that's what saved my life. Changing a style of life or change of country and all the rest of it. Coming up here to the end of the world, so to speak. You know. 20 years of my life, I basically traveled and worked overseas. I wanted to do that. I wanted to see the world, you know. I'd grown up in one place and I wanted to go visit the world. This is a dancing spear from Borneo. That's me in 1969 in Singapore. And this one here was done by a friend of mine years ago in Hong Kong. And what it means is, I think, you try to please everybody, but you can't. I lived in Germany, I lived in Mexico, I lived in Cambodia, I lived in Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, New Delhi, places like that. Come walk. Okay, this is all to keep the deer out. And a lot of my fences and things I've developed, invented. This, I just happened to find these things in the dump and stuff, and so simple, works. Okay, when I first came here, there were about a dozen people, I think, in Mitchell Bay, and most of them were immigrants from California. And your parents were just down the road, and they were probably, I don't know if they were the nearest neighbors, but probably at the time. It was free love time, and it was experimenting time, and we went against a lot of society's normal patterns, you know, in all sorts of different ways. And so that's why we were the outcasts, you know. It was hard for a while to be accepted because you were an outsider. But not only were we not from another island, or we were from another country. We'd come from the city for the most part, and many of us didn't have the proper rural skills that you needed to live here. So we taught each other, we helped each other, we communicated a lot with each other, you know, and we spent a lot of time together, and that was good. This is where you put your bow and arrow and aim to. It was good in many different ways, you know. It was good because it was helpful. It was good because it united people in a way that, you know, any shared occupation does, you know. And it was shared for our own good, not for the good of some corporate giant or something like that. So this was our home, and we were developing it. So we had to learn how to do carpentry stuff, and we had to learn how to do all these various things and so on. No, there was no running water here. There's still not at my place. And it's all a work in progress. And yes, I do want to have at some point a big table over here, and this will be the bar area. I need an audience of about 20 people to continually amuse. And then it's hard to find in Mitchell Bay. They're hard to find in Mitchell Bay. It was easier in the old days. My parents were friends. We had a lot in common, and we knew a lot of the same places. And when you share the same necessities or the same work patterns or whatever you want to call them with other people, you get to know them pretty well, you know, especially if you're next door neighbors. And this, my gong from Bali. We're all trying to sort of form a new life pattern, I think, you know, in many different ways. And so some of the things worked and some of the things didn't work, you know. So you learn pretty early what did and didn't.
Did you know my mother very well?
Well, yeah, I did, yeah. I got to know her quite well, actually. I fell in love with her. Hard not to. Oh, your mother was beautiful to begin with. I mean, physically beautiful. And she had this, I don't know, it's not a wildness exactly about her, but she wanted to live life and she wanted to experiment with things. And she has a questing quality about her. It was very appealing. Sometimes lives go in different directions, you know, unexpected directions, as they all do, but still, it often goes on. So, Julie and I didn't last very long, and I guess Gary and Linda didn't last very long either. So, different reasons.
And you take these numbers and you put them all together, and through the evergreens you can feel the sun. And you love the cover.
I guess I have to ask a question that I've been asking my father and myself, and how do I feel when I see this place? And it's absolutely gorgeous, and I think this is a very special place, but there's not a chance I could ever live here. It's isolating. It's a weird feeling. You know, I didn't really see hippies in a very good light, if you want to call them hippies or whatever. But you know, that's changing through the filming of this, and sort of understanding more of the time, and revealing and sort of redefining what this time was like. Ralph, he doesn't define himself as a hippie, which he's just a human, he's just a person, and we define him as that. And I think that's an important thing for me to remember.